Well, thank you very much, Glenn. In your top stories at 5:01, more on the Eugene Terreblanche trial within a trial, and Donovan Moodley has an option for a retrial in higher courts. Good afternoon. The defense in the Eugene Terreblanche murder trial are pulling out all the stops to prevent damning confessions from being admitted as evidence. This as the trial within a trial winds on in the Circuit High Court in Ventersdorp in the northwest. The right-wing leader was found bludgeoned to death on his farm over the Easter weekend last year. 2 farm workers, including a teenager, are on trial for the murder. The teenager's lawyer complained that he was left at the mercy of an interpreter who had no formal training. SABC senior court reporter Candice Klein has the details.
Reserve Detective Constable Emmanuel Mthembu buckled under the pressure of defense cross-examination. Put to the test on his translation skills, Mthembu failed to properly translate a section of the accused's rights from Afrikaans into Setswana. This section relates to an accused's right to remain silent. Yet Mthembu maintains that on the day of the confession, he was able to fully explain to the teenage accused his rights. The teenager's lawyers also made much of the fact that nobody bothered to appoint a probation officer at the time of the alleged confession. The probation officer is meant to explain the procedure to the child and assess his circumstances. Candice Klein, SABC News, Ventersdorp.
The National Prosecuting Authority says convicted killer Donovan Moodley still has the legal option to pursue his quest for a retrial in higher courts. This after the South Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg dismissed his application for a retrial for the murder and kidnapping of Lee Matthews in 2004. Judge Joop Lubuskachny called Moodley a liar and said his new story in which he pins the murder on 3 drug dealers riddled with improbabilities. Moodley is serving a life sentence for the murder. SABC senior specialist reporter Melanie Moses reports.
Today's ruling may have been a blow to Moodley, but it's certainly not the end of the road. The NPA says he can still approach the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court, but he would have to prove that his rights were violated at the trial and that he was treated unfairly. Prosecutor SAfm5pm says he won't be surprised if the matter comes up again.
I'm not confident at all that this is now over. Mr. Moodley stated in court that he will go on as long as he can go on.
Impala Platinum Mine in Rustenburg in the northwest has warned its workers who don't report for duty by the end of today will be fired. Spokesperson Bob Gilmore says most of the workers who embarked on an illegal wage strike have not reported for work. He says incidents of intimidation have been reported across the property. Implats has pledged to rehire employees who reapplied for their positions. Last month, 5,000 workers were fired for going on strike. The Western Cape Social Development Department has released more than 19 million rand to NGOs who deal with persons with disabilities. Provincial Minister Albert Fritz says the funding comes from the 50 million rand which they managed to save by cutting back on non-essential spending.
We are, for instance, funding residential facilities for persons with disabilities. We're also funding protective workshops, and we are funding developmental and therapeutic social welfare services, where that all deals with people living with disabilities. And this gives the importance of our provincial government's priority to people living with disabilities who we think were sometimes forgotten.
Russian opposition activists have erected a giant banner on a building facing the Kremlin, calling on Prime Minister Vladimir Putin to leave power. The yellow banner shows Putin's face crossed out with the words, "Putin, go away." It was later removed. Opposition leaders are planning a big anti-Putin rally in Moscow on Saturday. Vladimir Putin is the clear favorite for the presidential election in March. However, he has faced unprecedented protests since parliamentary polls in December, which the opposition say are rigged. And lastly, a disabled student from the University of the Free State, Herman van Heerden, has officially set a new Guinness World Record for the longest balancing act on the rear wheels of a wheelchair. The new record is 10 hours and 1 second. The record attempt was in October last year and is now the official record. University Rector Jonathan Jansen presented the Guinness World Record certificate to Van Heerden earlier today at the university's main campus in Bloemfontein. Van Heerden had this to say about his achievement.
I'm really happy because I've wanted to set a record for about 10 years now, and finally this year I got my certificate after trying to set the record. I'm in a wheelchair, so that is what I know. And 10 years ago, when I saw my first Guinness book, I was thinking about what record I could set. And the first thing I thought was, my wheelchair. And that's what I said to myself.
Recapping on your top story at 17:06 on SAfm, the defense in the Eugene Terreblanche murder trial are pulling out all the stops to prevent damning confessions from being admitted as evidence. This as the trial within a trial winds on in the Circuit High Court in Ventersdorp in the northwest.